Concubines lived for the emperor and they were made to die for the emperor. They were his to do with as he pleased, including taking them along with him in his afterlife for entertainment. Let's unfold the tragic fate of Chinese concubines in the Forbidden City. Concubinage is deeply steeped in Chinese history. It was a complex practice in Imperial China, and for most of the women a necessary evil to be adopted, simply because women at that time had only 4 options to survive: be a wife, work as a maid, be a concubine, or work as a prostitute. And out of the options available, being a concubine was one of the easiest ways available for a poor woman to earn social security and financial status, if she can't find a husband. Concubines were women who cohabited with emperors throughout the dynasties, but were never officially married and were subordinate to wives. An emperor could have as many concubines as he wanted, with the main purpose of bearing him lots of children and, of course, limitless opportunities to indulge in concupiscence. The day-to-day life of a Chinese concubine might be very difficult to understand in this modern age where male-female emancipation, although still imperfect, has advanced so much compared to the times of ancient China. The word concubine itself in Chinese can be literally translated into female slave. This shows the philosophy behind the concubinage. As an imperial concubine, your life is simply no longer your own and is considered the same as a slave. An imperial concubine life typically belonged only to the emperor. A concubine wasn't allowed to step out from the Forbidden Palace, where the ancient emperors of China lived, without any official consent from the emperor. She was also not permitted to communicate with the outside world, not in person and not even by mail. This ban went so far as to not allow a doctor to enter the palace and see a sick concubine. Her illness would be described and prescriptions acquired and administered according to the doctor's advice. The main role of a royal concubine was to fulfill the emperor's sexual needs, and they were forbidden to have carnal relationships with anyone else. The violation of this rule was punishable by death. It was believed that an emperor should have a good, vibrant love life for benefit of the entire Chinese empire. This was the core philosophy behind ensuring that only the best concubines get to sleep with the emperor at all times. Secretaries and scribes were employed to ensure that the emperor's sexual needs are always fulfilled by the right concubines. There were often hundreds of concubines inside the Forbidden City, so it was considered lucky to be chosen by the emperor, especially if she can bear children and be the mother of a prince. Many of them would have no experience meeting the emperor at all throughout their lifetimes, and so we can say they wasted their life hoping they were chosen by the emperor. A concubine's life remained typically boring and lonely. Some cases she would hardly ever interact with the emperor. However, if she became the emperor's favorite, she was likely to be involved in the endless competition for the emperor's love, which entailed schemes and plots against each other. She also risked being jailed or executed for offending the emperor or the empress. Until then, she must live in the palace and find ways to occupy her time. In day-to-day routines, she would perform ladylike works like sewing clothing and embroidery. In addition, a lower-ranked concubine had to attend to higher-ranked concubines' needs. And some special concubines had to serve and attend to the empress's needs directly. However, it's worth noting that throughout history, there are several occurrences of concubines who ended up controlling the ruling emperor from behind the screen, gaining power for themselves. Concubines were allowed to develop their ladylike hobbies, such as playing musical instruments, read literature, painting, calligraphy, and even to take care of their pets. However, much of her time was spent on self-care. She would make organic makeup products from lip papers and blush to eyebrow liners. She would put on a full face of makeup after applying facial masks or skincare products made of crushed pearl powder, mung bean powder paste, and doing a manicure using color soaked for 1 to 3 days from natural flower petals mixed with potassium alum. Sometimes her time was forced to be spent on maternity, having babies if it was allowed to bear, dealing with miscarriages, self-done abortions, and facing an abnormally high number of infant mortalities inside the palace. A concubine also spent time to make sure her ranking was clear to outsiders. She would always have with her a fixed number of servants. Female servants and eunuchs were regulated by different rankings, titles, and head counts under each level of concubine, so people could identify her ranking by looking at the number of servants. Her clothing, embroidered figures or patterns, and accessories would also reveal her official ranking. For any servants or concubines, they would recognize a senior level of concubine and greet her accordingly if they bumped into each other. One of the less glamorous parts of concubinage was the fact that the consorts were considered personal property of the ruler. They were his to do with as he pleased, including taking them with him to the afterlife. In many older tombs of nobles, we find the remains of several females of similar or slightly lower age buried close to a single man, a strong indicator of concubinage. The imperial consorts were either executed by palace eunuchs or chose to commit suicide, normally by hanging themselves with a silk scarf or by taking poison. In the first part of the Ming dynasty, concubines were often immolated and buried in separate tombs near the deceased emperor. In a few cases, consorts were buried alive in a standing position, awaiting the arrival of the emperor in the afterlife.